first, Indigenous activists had vowed they will squat in Melbourne's CBD until the King's Domain parkland is given to them. Now, the parkland includes the Shrine of Remembrance and the Maya Music Bowl. It also features a memorial to 38 Aboriginal people whose remains were reburied there in 1985. The activists are led by Robbie Thorpe. Now, he's the uncle of Independent Senator Lidia Thorpe, and they're demanding, amongst other things, a stone hut be created in the parklands for Indigenous purposes and that the area is renamed, omitting all references to the King and what they call the Windsor crime family. Now, Lidia Thorpe was there today and she spoke to Melbourne radio. She said, "This is about sovereignty. The whole notion of sovereignty in this country has never been resolved. It's a peaceful sit-in on country where we practice our sovereign rights on our own country." Here's another clip of Lidia Thorpe talking about sovereignty and how she sees the situation.
This is a war!
Now, I've got to admit, Caleb and Liz, I'm a little bit sympathetic to these activists because have they not been encouraged or even created by governments, woke corporations and even woke religious groups? Remember NAIDOC Week, and we have taxpayer funding for NAIDOC Week every year where they repeat over and over ad nauseum the slogan, always was, always will be, Aboriginal land. I remember going to church and they had always was, always will be Aboriginal land on the screens. I don't know why you go to church to learn what the social justice issue is.
What are they worshipping?
But I'm thinking, if we really believe this, shouldn't we all exit the building and hand over the land? Or here's Anthony Albanese, our now Prime Minister, speaking 2 years ago in Parliament.
Thanks very much, Mr Speaker, and I begin by acknowledging that we meet on the land of the Ngunnawal and Ngambri people, land that was, is and always will be Aboriginal land.
So aren't these activists really just taking woke corporations, the woke Prime Minister at his word? Or what about this? They want the King's Domain given to them. I didn't know too much about the King's Domain, so I went on the Victorian Government website today to find out what is the King's Domain in Melbourne parklands. And at the bottom of the page on the Victorian Government website, they have an acknowledgement of country where they talk about the, quote, unbroken spiritual, cultural and political connection of Indigenous people to the King's Domain that has existed for, and they actually say, 2,000 generations. I'm not quite sure how they worked that out.
That's some math.
Here's my point. These activists, I'm no longer really that angry or annoyed at them because they're not the biggest problem here. The biggest problem has been created by our political and cultural elites who keep saying things that they don't mean.
Well, that's true. Well, I don't know that they created it. They've certainly enabled it and they allow it to continue to go on. Yeah, exactly.
Inflamed it.
But it is fundamentally driven by a small group of nutcases in the Aboriginal community who believe that sovereignty was never ceded and they still have claim to the land, right?
But aren't they taking the Prime Minister at his word?
Yes, but when they say always was, always will be, we get the implication, but we all know it's not the truth, right? Even those who say it know it's not the truth. It's a slogan to shout at a rally or whatever it might be. But if he wants to stay there in his tent forever and a day, which is what Mr Thorpe has threatened to do, that's exactly where he's going to be, because they're never going to give King's Domain back to Aboriginal people. It's one of the most significant parks in Melbourne. And now Melbourne viewers will understand what I say when I say this. They will never take the tan from us. The tan is the walking trail that goes around King's Domain. It's very popular, but it's got Government House in it, for heaven's sake. I know we've been talking recently about whether or not we're going to get an Indigenous Governor-General. Perhaps if they ever hand King's Domain over, we'll get an Indigenous Governor of Victoria. But, I mean, come on, mate, seriously, what are you playing at?